everyone. Welcome to the latest in our GeoTalks Express series. I've lost count of how many of these we've done. It's been a year and a half. This is our summer edition. Very special one, a little bit of a different approach. We have, as many of you are aware, pending release of Global Mapper. Global Mapper version 23 is coming out next month, and we thought we'd use this opportunity over the summer to give you a little bit of a sneak peek. Now, again, a little bit different than our usual approach. We've invited some special guests to share some of the information about this release, why we're going through this release process, what's new in the release. So we'll introduce our guests in just a few minutes, so you get a feel for who's going to be participating in this presentation today. Before we begin that process, our obligatory housekeeping, and I know just looking down the list of folks who are joining us, I recognize a lot of the names. A lot of you have been here in previous webinars. Those who haven't, just a quick reminder as to how this setup works. We are obviously presenting to you. We can't hear you. Unlike many of the meetings I'm sure you've attended over the last year and a half where you have that back and forth communication, this is a one-way communication. We're going to be presenting to you. We're going to be speaking to you. Unfortunately, we can't hear you. That said, if you have questions, and we will encourage you today to ask any questions you may have about this pending release. As you'll see, there's a lot of changes going on in terms of how we're delivering Global Mapper. This is your opportunity to ask those questions. Over there on the right side of your screen, you'll see the GoToWebinar panel. One of the components, one of the tabs in there is a questions panel. I have a large window on my second monitor with that questions panel open. I'll be monitoring those questions as they come in. In fact, as you'll see in a second when we go through our agenda, at the end of today's presentation, we will set aside whatever time we have available to go through the questions that you may have and to have the folks on our panel today answer those questions directly. The session is being recorded. Obviously, many of you are going to be watching the recording of this, and indeed, if you have questions watching the recording, we will provide some contact information at the end. I'll also put it in the description on our YouTube channel, so if you have questions offline, you can ask those via email. But again, this is your opportunity to get as much information as you need with the pending release of Global Mapper. A few housekeeping issues again before we start. We have our continuing schedule of GeoTalks Express sessions. Today is a sneak peek preview of version 23. The formal release, as I mentioned, is going to be next month. Right after release, as we do for all of our releases, we're going to have a what's new. That's going to be more of a demonstration of the new functionality that's going to be included in version 23, followed right after in October by, kind of give away the plot here a little bit, a new version, a new structure to Global Mapper Pro. We're going to have a dedicated session where we'll talk about what's in Global Mapper Pro October 6th. Following on, we will be revisiting some of the themes that we've talked about in the past to bring those up into the Global Mapper Pro /23 context, and one of those is working with Global Mapper Mobile. So we'll do a little bit of data management, the transition or the transfer of data to and from Global Mapper Mobile, our mobile application, but in the context of Global Mapper Pro. Information about these sessions you'll see on the URL right here. Once again, I'll put that in the description so you can see that link right below if you're watching the recording of this presentation. One of the slides I didn't put in here, by the way, you will find out about this if you get our emails, but we will also be offering training. Our next scheduled public training class is coming up also in the end of September, right after the release. We'll obviously be incorporating the new tools into the training curriculum. If you want to get some hands-on experience using those, look for our training information. You can see that information on our website as well. But back to today, let's take a look at our plan. Again, this is a little bit different than what we usually do. We're not going to do a lot of demonstration of functionality. We're going to involve some stakeholders in Blue Marble. You're going to get some introductions here in just a second. We'll let the folks who are going to be participating in our panel introduce themselves to you, so you can not only hear them, but also, and this is a special treat, just this one time, we'll turn on our webcam so you can see who you're going to be speaking with today and who's going to be presenting. So introductions, we'll have a poll as we typically do in our presentations. We want to find out who's joining us today. We'll ask a simple little question. In fact, you'll find as we go through today's session, it will be a little more interactive than typical. We're going to have a quiz. I'm going to get to that in just a second, and obviously questions are going to be another part of that. So we're trying to keep this communication as interactive as possible. we're going to look at Global Mapper from three different perspectives: past, present, and future. I'm kind of giving away here. We've got Mike Childs with us today. Mike's going to give us a little bit of the story of how it all began. Where did Global Mapper come from? What was the impetus behind the initial development of Global Mapper? Patrick Cunningham, our company president, is going to tell us where we are now. We've made a decision with the release of version 23 to change the structure of Global Mapper, and Patrick's going to put that in a little context for us. You know, why did we make this decision, and where are we going with this new platform? Sam Knight, our Director of Product Management, is going to then get into the future. What are we looking at in terms of new functionality? What new tools are you going to have access to? Now, we're not going to, as I said, get into too much of the hands-on part in this session, but he'll go through that list and introduce some of the new tools that you can expect to see in version 23. As I mentioned before, we're going to have a quiz. I believe we've convinced the powers that be that there is a prize. We can deliver a prize. This will be using our polling system. We're going to have 5 questions, a Global Mapper general knowledge quiz, and a select winner will be receiving, as I mentioned, a t-shirt. And with whatever time we have available at the end, we will have a dedicated question and answer session, hearing from the panel on the questions that you ask us during the session. So again, use that questions panel over there on the right side, and we'll address those towards the end of our session. Patrick, why don't you start?
Good morning. I'm Patrick Cunningham, President and CEO of Blue Marble Geographics, and very excited to be here.
Excellent. Mike.
Good morning. I'm Mike Childs, the Global Mapper guru, is I think what they call me. I'm the original developer of Global Mapper. Kind of talk about that in a minute. Now I'm the lead developer.
Okay. Sam.
Good morning. I'm Sam Knight. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Blue Marble.
And Mackenzie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mackenzie. I work with our technical support team and marketing team, answering Global Mapper questions and writing some of the documentation that helps people understand how to use the program.
Yeah, Mackenzie's the veritable jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, does many things in the company. So as noted in my introduction, we're going to begin by looking over our shoulders. We're going to look over and take a look at Global Mapper Pass. Guys, I'm going to have you turn off your webcams for now. As we go through each individual presentation, we'll turn those back on again. So in looking over our shoulders, I put a slide in here, a very brief history of Global Mapper. Mike, I'm going to kind of lean on you for this. Obviously, you've been here for the duration, and I think probably the best way to introduce folks to where Global Mapper began is just to ask you the question: how did it all begin? How did Global Mapper get started? And go ahead and turn your webcam on again.
It started way back in the mid-90s, the last millennium for the millennial folks. I was a college student in Rolla, Missouri in the mid-90s. Working at the U.S. Geological Survey. They had, at the time, they had 4 big mapping centers in the whole country. One of those happened to be in rural Missouri for some reason. So at the time, they were a Unix shop, and Windows 95 was a new thing, and they wanted a Windows viewer for some of their products, specifically their DLG, or digital line graph vector product, like contour maps, hydrography, things like that. So they tasked the new student programmer, which was me, to write a Windows 95 program to read and display their DLG programs. So in 1996, we released from the USGS version 1 of what we called DLGV32, so a 32-bit, which was what it was at the time, DLG, or digital line graph viewer. And that was really popular. And then over the next couple of years, while I was still a student down there, we added new versions to read their raster maps, DRGs, topo maps, and then finally the DEMs, or the 3D maps. At the time, it was just a viewer, didn't do any kind of export or anything like that. And I graduated and went on to other things. And a couple of years later, they emailed, they had some new stuff they wanted to add, and they didn't really have anybody there that could do it. So like, how about if we release DLGV32 is open source, and then if you want to make a commercial version, you can go ahead and do that. And they're not playing favorites or anything like that. So I grabbed that and started DLGV32 Pro in 2001, added export and things like that. Sold the first license way back in August of 2001 for $60 whole, which it didn't do very much. But then I started churning out releases. Version 4, which is what it started at, ended up with 79 different releases, so over one a week. Basically, every time I add some new function for somebody, there'd be a new email that went out to at the time, dozens or hundreds of users. And it just kept growing. Pretty soon I had to rename it. DLGV32 Pro obviously isn't a very good name. So I went through a few different options, Carto View, and tried thinking of things, and ended up with Global Mapper pretty quickly. Luckily, no one had taken that name. So in 2001, switched over to Global Mapper, and then just kept churning out major releases just based on user input for the most part. What people wanted, and just added it, and did a bunch of releases every year. Of course, as it went on, you obviously can't manage 75 releases a year, so it got down to 4 or 5, and finally 3. And then in 2011, Blue Marble approached me, and I was acquired by them. And since then, we've had a whole development team, and we just keep adding things. I think Patrick's going to talk more about the time after the acquisition. But since then, I've been on the Blue Marble team and basically doing what I did before, but without all the sales stuff and support. So now I can focus on development.
So Mike, obviously, you got this project started yourself, but when you got rolling, you probably had a large staff working for you at that stage. How many people worked for the Mike Childs mapping company at the time?
There were none.
None.
Briefly a contractor for like a year of that, a couple of things, but that's mostly just me.
Yeah, I was a user of Global Mapper during that era, and when I learned that the application was developed by a single individual, I said, no, there's no way. There's no way. Mike, at the time, did you keep records of how many folks you had using? I know I had some numbers of for downloads of DLGV 32, but I can't remember what those were. But it was 100,000, I believe, or that region.
Yeah, I think by the time of the acquisition, it was in the 6 figures of licenses sold. Of course, the number of unregistered users was maybe double that. I mean, the free version you could use stuff and things like that. So it was quite a few. It was definitely in the 6 figures by the time the acquisition rolled around, which is quite a bit for one person to manage. Lots of automation in there.
Yeah. We have a question actually come in. Someone is asking, is DLGV 32 still available? Is that still available out there? Does the USGS still have that?
I'm not sure, actually. Last I checked, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, I believe that has morphed into Global Mapper completely. I don't believe the USGS has that. So obviously, Global Mapper has been around for a while in one form. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that introduction. And if you have questions for Mike, by the way, I know a lot of you have communicated with Mike in the past. This is a way to ask those questions as well. So go ahead and feel free to ask any questions. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to have you turn your webcam off now. As noted, the Global Mapper has been around for a while in one form or other since late 1990s. We're going to ask you a question. We're going to ask you how long you have been using Global Mapper. I know there are likely going to be some folks in our audience who do not currently use Global Mapper, but how long have you been using Global Mapper? You can go ahead and click right on your screen there. We will get a running update on. Some of you have been around for a while. I'm just looking at the results as they're coming in. I will share the results in just a second. Got some new users. That's great. We got a few folks who are joining us for the first time. That's excellent. So again, just a few more seconds. Wow, it's interesting that most of the folks here today are long-time users. So this is excellent. Good to have you along. And this is a significant milestone that we're approaching, obviously, with the release of version 23. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to be changing things a little bit. So obviously, it's very relevant for those that have been upgrading for a long time. I'll go ahead and close the poll, and I will quickly share those results with you. Hopefully, you're seeing those right now. So I don't know, the folks in the panelists, this is who we're speaking with today. Majority are obviously longtime users, but I always find it interesting when we deliver these presentations. There's folks who have not yet using Global Mapper that are interested enough to come along and to find out a little bit more about the application. So thank you for sharing your views there. Now, Mike alluded to the fact that I believe it was about 10 years ago. It was interesting. He said Blue Marble acquired him. Well, we also acquired Global Mapper as part of that deal. So we got Mike and we got Global Mapper as well. And as he mentioned, we were able to develop a structure around the application that wasn't there before. Mike was obviously running the show solo. We developed a sales team. We developed marketing materials. We developed training as well. So, and that is an ever evolving process. And to kind of bring us up to speed a little bit on that, I'm going to hand over the presentation here to Patrick, company president, and he'll kind of give the present story. Where are we currently and what's happening with Global Mapper right now? So Patrick, I'm going to give you the screen very quickly here so you can take it from here.
Sure. Can you hear me okay, David?
Yeah, you're all set, Patrick. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Mike, for that background. It's kind of neat to look back at the history of Global Mapper. And I just wanted to say a few words this morning about why Blue Marble went pro and on why our customers will want to go pro, as it were. The process of evolving the LiDAR module and Global Mapper has been one that we've put a lot of careful thought into. We've always been careful to listen to our customers and to bring them along as we evolve our products. It's just critical. And to this day, we still consider our customers as the experts in GIS and GIS analysis and all things geospatial. Blue Marble is just kind of a conduit for making you all successful. And I think you saw me flip over to this slide and maybe a little jarring. It's been a long time that we've been working on Global Mapper and working on GIS software, and well, things change and they evolve. And I remember moving away from the early Global Mapper disco logo, as we call it. That was even a bit of a trying exercise for us, much to the chagrin of our graphics people at the time, because we want to. We didn't want to come in and seem like we were going to change everything up and make something that was actually really great, fix something that wasn't broken, right? So we did it gradually. We even updated menu buttons and trimmed perhaps some of the world's longest right-click menus. All those things are things we tackled very carefully and with a lot of thought. And, I've always personally, and I think a lot of the product management team have taken the perspective that there's nothing worse with a software release, something that you use every day or that you rely on when you install that update, and you can no longer do the things that you do every day very easily. You can no longer find menus or figure out what you always do, because things have dramatically shifted and changed things around, and so we just never wanted to burden our users with sudden pressing needs for like training just to do what they always do. So that's another reason why we've always been careful and take our time with evolving our software. But it's not to say that Blue Marble doesn't have expertise. After all, as you probably know, we had our start as kind of the coordinate conversion software company. We predated Global Mapper a little bit. 93, I think, is when the company started. And we certainly had a lot of different software tools, but we became known as the folks that tackled the hard stuff in mapping, the math behind the map, the stuff that people just want right or correct, and they don't want to fuss with it. So, I put the slide up to harken back to the days pre-Global Mapper, where I got my start at Blue Marble, and all of our staff had to take deep dives into geodesy and present slide decks visualizing things that are not easy to visualize. How difficult it is to train a salesperson about datum shifts, or how hard it is to make an entire presentation about coordinate conversion. It's not very sexy, and it's sometimes difficult to communicate. But our focus on that area of mapping kind of put us at the forefront of what our company was doing and what was coming in the mid-90s. With our GeoCalc libraries and focus on positioning, we we saw that the next big thing, even before Global Mapper, was 3D and mapping. And we were neck deep in implementing geoids and vertical datums in our software when 2011 rolled around. So we were anticipating that 3D was coming and it was going to be a really great thing for geospatial. And to this day, it really has sort of changed the way we do mapping and what people expect from mapping software. So, with Global Mapper, the unanticipated benefit of Global Mapper that we found, besides, the hundreds and hundreds of file formats, was the support for visualization and analysis of big data. And LiDAR was and is big data. So when we teamed up with Mike, he was fully on board. We were all on board, excited about what we could do in the area of LiDAR and 3D and Global Mapper. And also, merging and marrying our coordinate conversion tools with it. So, at the time though, LiDAR was very new, and a lot of people weren't using it, couldn't get the data, and it was more a niche. So it made sense at the time to develop a lot of those tools into a module that would focus on LiDAR and point cloud data, knowing that eventually the data type would become more ubiquitous, would become more commonplace, and that perhaps we would evolve the module into something else. And so over time, we were able to stay focused on LiDAR tools, automatic classification, extraction, that type of things. But I think it was around the time that we came up with our pixels to points tool for working with drone and UAV imagery that we really started to see the writing on the wall about the LiDAR module, in that we were getting into a set of tools that, though they were working in 3D and working with point data, it wasn't really LiDAR data. And that's about the time when we started talking about, what is next for the LiDAR module. There were other tools that had found their way into the LiDAR module that weren't LiDAR focused as well. It was just starting to pile on, and the decision was made to make a plan for the next phase for the LiDAR module, and that's kind of how we arrived at going pro. And so, we're very excited about Global Mapper Pro. We're very excited about the ability now to bring other advanced tools into our software and have a way to make it work for that advanced GIS analyst or surveyor. And that's what Global Mapper Pro is all about. It encompasses all the great tools of the LiDAR module, but will also be home to other advanced geospatial tools that we've had in the wood shop for quite some time, some of these, and other things that are coming down the pike that we're very excited about. I don't want to steal any of, I believe, Sam's thunder or the next webinar, but we have things like Python scripting and break line extraction, RTK support, and these types of tools that you're going to see featured in Pro. Certainly, there are tools in base Global Mapper that one could maybe even argue should be in the Pro module. The raster calculator is one that comes to mind for me. Those are going to remain the base product, and we're committed to having a base product that's accessible and affordable to all GIS analysts. So we're not really changing the way we do things. We're just doing something that makes more sense for the tools that we can bring to geospatial analysis, and that's really what Global Mapper Pro is all about.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I know we've said at the end of our session today we are going to have a time to answer questions, and a lot of you are asking questions about functionality specifically. Hold those thoughts for the time being. Sam, as Patrick mentioned, is going to come up in a minute, and I'll go through a list of what you can expect. But one question, Patrick, maybe I can throw to you right now. A simple one, and it's probably something that will affect a lot of folks, is Global Mapper Pro replacing the LiDAR module? Is that our approach? Are we retiring the LiDAR module, I guess is a better way of describing this, and replacing it with Global Mapper Pro?
That's correct. If you're a LiDAR module user, you'll be moving to Global Mapper Pro, and we think you're going to really be excited by it.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Patrick. Now, those questions that you're asking, keep them coming, folks. Patrick will be back. Sam, Mike will be back later, and we will have a time, as I mentioned, to go through some of the questions you have been asking. But for now, we've looked at Global Mapper past. We've looked at Global Mapper present. Time to change and look at Global Mapper future. I'm going to hand over the presentation here to Sam, and Sam is going to guide us through what's happening in the future, a little bit of a list of what's coming up with version 23. Hey, Sam. I think you're muted, Sam.
I am still muted. There we go. Okay. And I think we've got webcams, and we've got, you can see my slides as well, Dave?
Yeah, you're all set, Sam. Yeah, you're good.
All right, wonderful. So like Patrick was talking about there, there's a lot of things coming. We've sort of laid this foundation of the new direction we're going to be going. With new tools, rest comfortably on that knowledge that the things that are in the current base version of the application are going to remain in the base version of the application. Pro is really allowing us a place where we can grow new functionality and have some of the groupings, make a little more sense. We're going to put the really advanced tools in the Pro module, and all the stuff that's been there for a very long time is going to stay right in the base. What I'm going to focus on here is just specifically what's coming new across 23. So I'm going to be talking specifically about things that are in both the base version of the application and in the Pro level application. So these are things that would have previously been tucked into the LiDAR module, but now it's just simply Pro. That's the easy way to think about it. So there's a little bit of something for everybody in here. I'm not going to get into a breakdown of exactly what is going where. And this is going to be a very high level view. For the real deep dive on the technical ins and outs of a lot of these things, make sure to tune back in for the What's New webinar, where that will be a purely technical demonstration instead of all of our talking heads here. So first and foremost, I didn't want to beat around the bush on this one because people have been asking for this for many, many years, going all the way back to when we first started working with it in 2011, and I know Mike has been getting requests since before the acquisition. Undo. It has been one of our most popular requests. It's a silly thing. Everybody expects to have it in every application now. And honestly, from a programming standpoint, it's very complicated to do that. So we've kicked that can down the road a few times. Undo is coming to Global Mapper. It is going to be all throughout the application. Just about everything you can do, you can undo, and then you can also redo if you want to do it again. That's as simple as we can keep that one. For those of you working with the new Spatial Operations tool that we recently introduced in the past couple of versions, the initial versions of that were only able to function on area features. And so now Spatial Operations is going to be able to act on lines as well as areas. So expanding those geometry types. The long-term arc of that is we plan to bring that to all of the types of geometry that make sense. So for things involving points off in the future, we can expect that in the future, but in the immediate release right here, we're bringing in line functions. So for all of those spatial operations, things like unions and differences, all of those types of things, lines are going to be coming onto that list as well. 3D labeling. This is one we really like. I'm going to show just a couple of sort of little teases on some of these functions. I have a couple of slides after this. 3D labeling, this is going to be something for everyone. It's in both the base version as well as the Pro level, likewise the Spatial Operations previously. Our 3D labeling has been functional for a while. We could slap a label down on the terrain and things like that, but they haven't been particularly attractive. There's going to be a new option for label layers specifically. You can create a label layer for your data. And there are two options for how to display those in 3D. One where they will float, sort of facing your eyeball as you rotate and zoom in and out of the 3D window. Or the other version is what we're calling flat labels, and that is basically pressing the label back down on the terrain, sort of like how we've done it for a while now when we burn those into the rasters. Just a lot better looking and a lot more readable. There's some additional settings around there that are really going to help this stand out on your 3D This is a really exciting one for us. Another very popular request for a while has been Python scripting. Python, for those of you that are not familiar, it's basically it's a scripting / programming language that is all over the place now. It's an open source project. A lot of students are exposed to it in university level GIS applications. Many industry tools have integrations for scripting via Python, but it goes a little beyond what we've had for our traditional scripting. GM script, for those of you who have been using GM script for a very long time, that's not going anywhere. We still have that. We're simply adding on Python as an additional method of doing that scripting. It can be run in exactly the same way, but it also gives us the ability to access Global Mapper from completely outside Global Mapper. So you can have Python, a separate Python application, take advantage of some of the functions of Global Mapper without having the overhead of Global Mapper. There's a lot to get into with that one, so I'm going to leave that one there. And be sure to tune back in for some of the other webinars coming this fall. Along with Python scripting, we're having a new scripting editor. So for those of you that have been doing GM scripts for a long time, you've been writing those in whatever your favorite text editor is, and you can still do that. That's fine. I tend to work in Notepad++ if I'm doing that. Everybody has their own favorites. We've had a sort of a popular-ish request for a long time to make that a little bit more accessible within the application. So we have a new dialog that is going to support both our GM script as well as Python scripting. It's going to be a simple tabbed interface for however you want to do your scripting, and it has a lot of helpful tools like colorization for the syntax in the scripts, making it a little more accessible for folks to dive in and start scripting. So we're still going to be offering our example scripts and things like that. It is very accessible, and if you've already got experience in Python, you can probably step right into the Python scripting a little more easily. If you're someone that's been doing GM script for a very long time, that's still going to be supported right in parallel. There's essentially parity between the two of those. Python just has a little more sort of external capabilities since it doesn't need to run internally in Global Mapper itself. So that's kind of a cool one. For the LiDAR folks, and I'll broaden this out to LiDAR folks, but I'll just point clouds in general. We've revamped the classification tools, particularly to add better support and better classification around point clouds that have variable density. So a lot of folks who work with aerial LiDAR are very familiar with very uniform density. The common USGS data that's available all over the states here is about 1.2 points every square meter, very uniform, and the overlap areas are very clearly identified. Terrestrial data, because of how it's collected on the ground, it tends to have areas of higher density and lower density, and mobile LiDAR suffers from the same thing. Drone-based photogrammetric point clouds has a little bit of difference in there as well, depending on how the scans are done and things like that. So this is a subtle under the hood change that basically is going to allow us to do a better job of classifying the same things we've been able to classify, but broadening that out into better support for terrestrial clouds and just general mixed density clouds in general. So that's going to be another very useful one for the formerly LiDAR module becoming Global Mapper Pro folks. In addition to the changes to our existing classification algorithms, those existing classification algorithms work just like they always have. There's no real different parameters. It's just some better changes under the hood to support those. Additionally to that, we have a new, completely new LiDAR method that we're calling segmentation. So this is a completely different algorithm for figuring out what is what in a point cloud, essentially. What segmentation allows us to do, it's very advanced statistical modeling that figures out what things are likely to be a singular object. We may not know what that object is, and there are some things that we can very easily pick back out. It's going to give us an alternate method for classifying and extracting buildings and vegetation, ground, some of the things that we've always done, but it's leading the way into new classifications. So any object, and these are first going to come in as a manual classification, but it's really opening the door to a expansion of the ability to automatically find things in the real world where data is messy and not always clean cookie cutters. We're going to take a look at that on a later slide here as well. Within that segmentation method, there's a really exciting new option to colorize point clouds by the LiDAR segment you're looking at. And effectively what that does is it assigns colors to those groupings of objects. And even in the absence of any RGB values in the cloud, it makes things very much more clearly stand out as unique objects. So it's a nice new way to look at the data. For those of you doing anything where you need to work with break lines, particularly folks working with water flow modeling, hydrography, things like that, curb finding, cliff finding, any of those types of terrain analysis exercises, you know how long it takes to extract break lines. So we're very excited about a new break line extraction tool. I believe that's been one of Mike's major projects for the summer here. Basically just a way to start off with a good starting point for figuring out where the break lines in your terrain data are going to be. Vectorization of raster. A lot of you who maybe have come to our trainings in the past, this is a common thing we've done for a long time. So we had a few tools in the box about figuring out what areas of a raster were things like the same color or similar slopes and things like that. Taking that raster data and distilling it out to figuring out where things like edges, center lines, all those sorts of things. We had some nice workflows to do that, and they've worked very well for a long time. However, there's a lot of steps to some of those, and this is a case of one of those things where we see, well, we know how to do these 10 different things it takes to complete this one workflow. What if we just tool chain those all together into a singular workflow and added some defaults to that? And so that's essentially what this is. So there's a new tool for vectorization of rasters that really streamlines that process of things like pulling out center lines or delineating the edges of maybe different line classifications, things like that. RTK support for those of you that are working live in the field with GPSs. That is kind of an exciting new thing. This sort of was an offshoot of some work we did earlier this year in the mobile application. So for those of you that are Global Mapper mobile users, the RTK support was a very popular request over there. As we implemented that in the mobile platforms, we just kind of said, well, do people want this on the desktop? What if? How hard is this to do? And we moved that right over into Global Mapper Pro. Lets you direct connect to a number, basically any kind of RTK GPS unit you want to work with. There's support for putting in your credentials to log into the networks you might be connecting into. But it just brings that that additional capability of easier use of very high accuracy and high precision survey grade units in that live mode. Whether you're maybe you're driving around with an RTK thing on the roof of a vehicle, maybe you're working with an ultra portable tablet-based laptop or something like that. You've got full Global Mapper running out in the field. Just a very handy tool coming along for the GPS tools. Class breaks. This is another kind of fun one. I'll mention class breaks is going to definitely be found in the base version of Global Mapper. This is supporting a few new methods for breaking up classes of data in a few different types, sometimes referred to as janks or natural breaks. There's a few ways. This essentially puts groupings within data that can make kind of more meaningful symbology or more meaningful thematic mapping as you're developing a cartographic representation of an area that is much more visual, a little more visually friendly. Sometimes it's a little where data is messy. Class breaks can kind of help us classify some of So real quick, I just want to show a couple of little teasers that I mentioned here. This is just a quick view of the 3D labeling. This is one of the types of 3D labeling that we're supporting. This is just a simple terrain map of Maine with the names of the towns that are throughout the state here. You'll notice the ones up front are much clearer, and the ones that go off into the distance there, we kind of fade those out as they get way farther away and a little less relevant. This moves and shifts as you pan and zoom around the 3D window. So in this particular mode, all of those names will stay facing you as the viewer with your virtual eyeballs in the 3D view. Way more readable than our old methods of labeling. The other method would simply take those labels and squash them flat onto the surface of the terrain, but keep them just up above that terrain enough so you can still actually read them much better than our previous representation. So this is kind of a big usability improvement on the 3D window. And lastly, I just want to really quick show, this is an example of our new segmentation-based classification and extraction tools in what would have been the LiDAR module, now GM Pro. So you'll see, looking around the view here, this is a little snapshot of part of the downtown in Hollow here where we are. You see this purple tree right up front. And what I want you to notice is that entire tree is purple. If you see, there's a little dock that's been pulled out of the water for the winter there, right in the middle of the screen. That's kind of a light green, and there's a sort of a gangway that's been stacked on top of it, and there's another one right next to it that's blue. This is that statistical grouping that I was talking about. So, what are likely to be individual objects within this scene? You see the individual trees off in the far background there, the power lines, the church steeple, and so on. So this is going to be both a new option. This is not simply replacing our old classification tools. This is simply going to be a new option that's really going to sort of pave the way for some additional classifications, additional extraction workflows, and things like that. So this is an exciting new direction for us to be going. That's going to be about all I've got time for. I know we've got to keep things moving here.
Thank you, Sam. So I just have to share this with Sam. Right after you talked about undo, we had dancing emoji came in, so a lot of positive reaction to the undo. We like to think undo wasn't there because Global Mapper users seldom make mistakes, but that's probably not the case. So everybody needs an undo at some time. A couple of questions here, Sam, while we have you on screen. A couple of questions about Python. Let me just throw this one out. Will you be able to write both Python and GM scripts in one code and run them simultaneously? I don't know if we want to get into this in too much depth today, or if we want to leave this one.
I'm gonna let's leave that for a subsequent webinar.
Yeah, there's a lot involved in the basics.
There's two answers to that. I think likely, and they're opposite of each other. So that takes a little longer to answer. Let's keep that one.
Yeah, but suffice to say, you have options to run your scripts. And I know a lot of you are familiar with Python, and you can certainly bring that to Global Mapper. Your Global Mapper scripts that you've been running all along will still work. Someone asked, is the where does the pixels to point tool fall under Pro or Basic? We're obviously, for those of you who are new to Global Mapper, we're obviously targeting specifically today the new tools. We're not kind of broadening the picture as to the other things that have been here all along. Pixels to point, for those of you who don't know, is a really powerful tool for generating a point cloud typically from overlapping drone images. So Sam, maybe you can answer, where is that going to fall in the new release? Is it part of the base version, or is it going to be in Pro?
Yep. So if you're not currently a user, I'll just start by saying Pixels to Points was formerly part of the LiDAR module. So everything that was in the LiDAR module is going to be in the Pro level of the application now. It's effectively, any past users think of it as a renaming of the LiDAR module over to being called Pro now. For users that have been with us for a long time, the stratification is as simple as everything that was formerly in the base version of the application is still in the base version of the application and is still going to be in the base version of the application. Everything that was in the LiDAR module will be transitioning over to Pro. There are resources on our website for what's currently in those stratifications of the base version, as well as the LiDAR. We have a very useful list that I refer to myself still on our website about where those breakdowns go. There's also going to be a lot of new materials coming out in the next month as we get ready for the release to break down exactly what is in version. But pixels to points is going to be Pro.
Yeah, and just to clarify again, just reflecting some of the questions, what we're focusing on here, obviously, are the highlights for this release. The actual list is much, much longer.
Yeah, I'll wrap by my own time here by saying it was really hard to make this list so short.
Yeah. So when you install any version of Global Mapper, you are prompted with a dialog box that goes through the what's new. It might be worth your while to go through that list, and there may be functions that are more specific to what you need that are included in there. Thank you, Sam.
There's a lot of stuff at both levels. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sam. Sam will be around later again to answer questions. I've got a few already coming in the list, and I'm going to be throwing Sam's direction. So thank you, Sam. I'm going to take the screen back here very quickly because you've been listening long enough here. It's time for you to participate. Let me go ahead and show my screen here. It's quiz time. We're going to use the polling function. This is the first time we've done that, so bear with us here. We're going to use the polling function. We've got 5 questions. This is a general knowledge global mapper quiz, and as I mentioned at the start, I believe we have a prize in store. We're going to be sending a t-shirt out to a lucky winner. Do not use the questions panel for the answers, please. You can click right on the screen. Now, this is also going to determine who of you were paying attention, because I believe a lot of the questions were addressed by some of our previous presenters. So we'll find out who was paying attention earlier. So again, 5 questions are coming your way. Let's go ahead and launch question 1. First question. What was the original name of Global Mapper before it became Global Mapper? I'll give you just a few seconds to answer that one. And it looks like many of you were paying attention. That's great. I'm so glad to see that you were listening when Mike was giving his spiel. So just a couple more seconds. And by the way, we know what your answers are, so we'll contact you personally if you are the lucky winner of our t-shirts. I want to close that one. I will share the results very quickly so you can see what your fellow attendee said. Obviously, most of you realize it was DLGV32, the original name. It's interesting if some of you thought Mike's Mapmaker. I don't know, Mike. Is that a good name? And maybe we should think about that one for version 24. Mike's Mapmaker.
Yeah, we could rebrand, maybe. I don't know if it's too late to change all the materials before release next month.
Well, Mackenzie's doing a lot of work with the documentation. Mackenzie, what do you think? Do you think you can update all the marketing materials to Mike's Mapmaker?
I don't know. We might have to push that one to the next release, guys.
Okay. Well, good try. Well, some of you thought it was a good name at least. No, it was DLGV, Digital Line Graph Viewer 32. Speaking of which, our next question. How many file formats did that initial version of what was to become Global Mapper, how many versions did it support? A wide spectrum of responses to this one. There's a little bit of a clue in the name. Hopefully, I think you can change your answer, by the way. If you made the wrong choice, I think you can re-click and change. I hope you can. But there's a little bit of a clue in the name. Again, first edition, back in 1996. Oh, again, I think I've given away an answer to a future question. A couple of seconds here, and we will close our poll. And again, let me share the results of that one. A lot of you thought it was 32. Hold that thought in terms of how many formats Global Mapper supports, but certainly the first version was 1. It was a digital line graph viewer. DLG data was supplied by USGS. That's what Mike initially was involved in, a viewing application for that data. So version 1 of Global Mapper, or version 1 of what would become Global Mapper, supported 1 file format. Let me go ahead and hide this one. I got a couple or 3 more to go. Following from that one, we're about to release version 23. How many file formats are we up to now? How many file formats will version 23 support? And again, we're seeing a range of responses coming in here. I think most of you have got the idea where we're going with this. It looks like you're answering correctly. Again, a couple more seconds here to put your answer in. And let's go ahead and we'll close that one. And again, I'll share the results. Yeah, 326. There is a little bit of ambiguity in terms of that number, because I know there are formats that are in different versions. They've changed slightly, but the best guess that we can come up with is well over 300 formats, and that is an ever-evolving component of the application, and it does kind of illustrate or represent its interoperability. Any data that you work with, chances are you can work with in Global Mapper. And what we like to say to folks that we communicate with is, if there's a format of data that is not working, we have already had one question at least about data formats, please let us know if there's a file format you're working with that's either not currently working or you would like to see added, and we will do our best to see if that can be added to increase this this number. How many do I have left? I have 2 left. Hopefully you're doing well with these. This is one again that was covered earlier. Again, we'll see who was paying attention. Let's go ahead and launch that one. When did the first version of DLGV32, when was it released? I think Mike did mention this earlier. Looks like some of you were paying attention. And again, just a couple more seconds to put your response in. And we'll close. Now, there was a few dates that were thrown out. Maybe this confused you just a little bit. Mike, when was the first commercial? When did you sell your first license? I think you mentioned it earlier.
The first sold one was 2001,
So,
but the first DLGV32, you can see why it had to be renamed. It's quite a mouthful. That was 1996.
1996. I think some people were thrown by the second date, that the commercial, the first commercial. I believe the first commercial version wasn't actually version 1. Am I correct in saying that, Mike, as well?
It was version for the USGS. There was version 1, 2, and 3. So then DLGV32 Pro kept going at version 4. I guess this will be the 25th anniversary since 1996 was the first year.
Oh, we should have some celebration. We should have, definitely should have some celebration. Yeah, duly noted. Okay, one final question. This, I think, Mike, you maybe have alluded to this one as well during your spiel, but we're up to version, we're going to be releasing version 23. How many previous releases of Global Mapper have there been? We're talking about the commercial releases. We're talking about since 2001 when we first started counting. How many releases of Global Mapper have there been in the, what, 20 years since we've been releasing the commercial version? Some people are kind of taking the sequence of the numbers a little too literally, perhaps. Let's give you another couple of seconds. And we will go ahead and close our final question. Sorry if I cut some of you off there. Okay, some of you fell for it. Yes, version 23 is coming along. Would we assume therefore there were 22 previous versions? No. Mike mentioned that version 4 actually had, what was it, 70?
79, so over half. Yeah, for this question, I counted every time there was like a release or an email sent out. Like now we would do 22.0 and 22.1, which would be 2. But at the time of version 4, there was 4.0001 all the way up to 4.78. So over half of the total releases were in that first year.
Yeah, a little bit of a trick question. I apologize. That was a mean one to ask at the end, but some of you got it. Some of you were able to get the responses. In fact, I think just looking at the trends, I think most of you or a lot of you would have gotten all those answers right. We will go through your responses. We will get a report, and somebody's going to get a t-shirt. We'll announce who that is in our follow-up email as well. So we've just got a few minutes left here. We had hoped to have a little bit more time. There are a lot of questions in our questions panel, and this is an opportunity if you have any questions that have come to mind over Patrick, Sam, or Mike's presentations. If you have questions, throw them in there. If we don't answer them now, we will follow up, or we'll put them in our blog. That will evolve into an FAQ, so you can refer to that and get responses to your questions. Let me ask some of the basic ones. I'm going to have the guys turn their cams on again, the webcam, so we can get a little bit of a discussion going here. Okay, there we are. Couple of questions. I've noted down some of my notes here. I think some we already have addressed. Why this is a good question. Maybe Patrick, you could jump in. So why is the LiDAR module being replaced? I think you did allude to this during your presentation, but maybe elaborate a little bit on why the decision was made to replace the LiDAR module.
Well, the short of it is that it was always the plan eventually to migrate the LiDAR module to something else. And really what it is that we have the need to do other advanced tools, and we'd been putting them in the LiDAR module. We don't want to make a lot of different modules. And so it was time to kind of, graduate to a different offering, place where, because LiDAR, as I had said, also is kind of becoming more and more common and freely available. So it made sense for us to sort of migrate to the Pro module.
Okay, so yeah, it was a long-term decision. We didn't come on this lightly. There's been several years of discussions where we've been deliberating over this issue. I mentioned somebody asked a question about pixels to point. I think we covered that one as well. Pixels to points will migrate right into Global Mapper Pro. I think we're all set with that. When is it scheduled? Mackenzie, I don't know if you're from, Mackenzie does work a little bit with the marketing team. When are we scheduled for release? When is our due date for this?
Mid-September, so it's coming up soon.
Do we have a specific date yet, or will that will become clearer once we
that will become clearer, and we'll make sure that you hear about it.
Excellent, excellent. We have a couple of people asking questions specifically about the beta. We are currently in beta mode. It is happening right now. For those of you who are involved in beta testing, please give us your feedback. That's why we do this. We want to make sure it's working. So beta has started. If you're interested in beta testing in the future, let us know as well. A little bit late for this round, but for future releases, certainly we'll want your input on how the tools are working. Boy, that questions are coming in thick and fast. A few people have been asking about pricing, inevitably. Patrick, I don't know if we're in a position where we can maybe answer some questions on how much this is going to cost, both Pro and maybe the base version.
Sure. The easiest way to put it is the base is going to go up about $50, as we have done periodically every few years. Pro will be at the single user level. So we're talking about, I can't go through all the breakdowns of the licensing, but Pro will be a little bit more than that. A single Pro license would be a $750 purchase in addition to the base product.
Okay. Sam,
going off of that, just to chime in, going off of that, Patrick, are we changing at all the maintenance and support and the upgrade structure that's currently in place?
No, we're not. So if you're current in maintenance and support, you would, with a LiDAR module maintenance and support, you'll get a Pro license, just as you would if it were just another LiDAR module release.
Okay, Sam, I'm going to throw this one to you. Somebody's asking about mobile. We alluded to mobile a little bit there. We are going to be having a presentation coming up, one of our webinars. Someone's asking if there are any changes to mobile with this release.
So at 23, really what I mentioned earlier was the RTK support that we introduced in the mobile platform is coming into 23 at the desktop level. In mobile's release was back in July, so that release is out, it's stable. We're starting to keep our eyes on the next release for mobile, but there's the mobile work has already been done, and now 23 is just catching up to that.
Okay. So obviously compatibility, Global Mapper Pro will be directly compatible with the current release of Global Mapper Mobile.
Right. Exactly.
We have a few variations on the theme of the licensing. I assume these are coming from folks who currently have Global Mapper and the LiDAR module. The questions relate to maintenance and support. In other words, if they have the Global Mapper 22.1 and the LiDAR module, is that upgrade for free? Patrick, I don't know if you want to jump in and answer that one as well.
It is. If you're current in maintenance and support, meaning you renewed your maintenance and support, say in August or July, you'll be getting the Global Mapper Pro upgrade just as you always would. So if you have a pending maintenance support renewal coming up, and it's before that mid-September release date, you're going to want to renew that as soon as possible, and you'll get the Pro upgrade.
Excellent. And related to that second part two of that question, this question comes from, I assume, somebody who's not a current user. If that person purchases the current release, which is obviously 22.1 until release time, if that person purchases that version, will they get version 23 for free once they've purchased for version 22.1?
Yes, they will. Yes, yeah.
Good. Long question, short answer. We are just about out of time. The questions are flooding in here at the end. If we didn't have a chance to answer yours, I apologize. As I've said, we're going to take these questions. We're going to get appropriate answers. We'll put them on a blog, and we'll share that with all of you folks. You'll get an email, hopefully within a few days, with all of these responses. I'm going to suggest we all turn our cams off. You've had enough of that, and we'll wrap up for the day. We've reached the top of the hour. Just by way of wrapping up, a couple of reminders. As we've mentioned, I'll have to check my notes here. It's the 29th of next month. Sam gave us an overview of what's happening. If you want to see those tools in action, specifically for the base versions to start with, we're going to have that webinar on the 29th. Following the week after, we're going to take our first formal look at the new product, Global Mapper Pro. So sign up for those 2 sessions end of next month. If you are new to Global Mapper, and I know just based on the poll that many of you are, there's a couple of contact emails here that might be helpful. If you want some information on our licensing, you can send an email to orders. If you have technical questions, or indeed if you have been watching the recording of this session, you can email geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com, and you will provide you the answers. You might want to note that you watched this presentation so we know the context of your questions. If you want to try Global Mapper currently, if you've dropped in today and you've never used it before, we encourage you to go to bluemarblegeo.com. You can download a trial version and put it through its paces, see if it works for you. That's just about all the time we have for today, folks. I'd like to thank the panelists, our who's who list of Blue Marble Geographics, for helping today, providing their expertise. And I said before, you're not going to get this every month. This is a special event. And thank you all for taking your time to attend today. We look forward to speaking with you again in about a month. Thank you, folks.